Welcome to CRCCMadang, everybody. This is our chance to meet our wonderful staff from Wespath. Frank O'Brien, he is going to introduce himself and the retirement plan overview. Let's welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me and there's no static or anything. As I explained, we're getting some new technology here that we're still trying to get used to, so hopefully everything is working fine. My name is Frank O'Brien. I'm a benefits educator at Wespath. I have been with Wespath almost 3 years. September 30th, it'll be 3 years. I am a remote employee of Wespath. I was hired as such, so I actually, up until April, lived on Long Island, New York. And then April 1st, my wife and I moved down to Southeast Florida. So I'm speaking to you today from Florida. 22 years ago, I worked with Mellon Financial in their retirement savings world, and a church retirement plan came into our work area, and I worked on that for a few years and then ended up working for that organization. So for 20 years or so, I've been working in the retirement financial realm in faith-based, Christian faith-based retirement and financial services. So I have a decent enough background, I think, to help us get through the material that we'll go through over these next couple of hours. It's absolutely my pleasure to be with all of you today. Being on mute is definitely the way to go, but periodically, if you have a question or what have you, we'll try to get to that as we can. So for today, I will review with you the Wespath retirement plans. I'm going to go through the current plans that we're in, some legacy plans that some of you, or legacy plan that some of you may be in, and then an older legacy plan, which I highly doubt, but I'll touch on that. I'll speak to investing with Wespath, the Wespath family of funds, and a program that we have there called Life Stage Investment Management. I'll also talk about the comprehensive protection plan. That's the welfare plan, the death and disability plan that many, if not all of you, are covered under. Hit on Wespath participant services, various ways in which we can provide support to you. Then I'm briefly going to talk about a plan called Compass, which is coming down the road. We anticipated it will go through next general conference, whenever there is a general conference. So I'll just kind of hit on a couple of things there, tie it back into the conversation around the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan. And then I was asked to give some information around this public service loan forgiveness program. And coincidentally, a couple of months ago, we at Wespath actually had 2 webinars where an individual from the Consumer Protection Board and affiliated with the Department of Education did a webinar for us. So I've taken some of his slides that we're allowed to use, some of his slides, and I'm going to talk to what I understand about it. It's not a deep dive, it's a little bit complicated, but I'll give you an executive summary of what this is all about. Key here is October 31st, 2022. It's a key date to keep in mind if you're thinking about this loan forgiveness program. But immediately following this, the deck that I am using, a link to do one-on-one benefit education consultations you'll hear about, which is when you come one-on-one with myself or my colleagues to go through your particular retirement plan arrangements. And then in that, I'll also have the link to the webinar that we had and a PDF of the deck that he had as well, so you can get more information around the loan forgiveness program. As a reminder, Wespath, we are a not-for-profit organization. We are a church pension board that approximately $27 billion in assets under management. Obviously, in today's world, it's a moving number, so I'm not exactly sure where we are, but we are the largest reporting faith-based pension fund in the world. We certainly have a lot of economy of scale, which actually plays into how we're able to organize and operate our organization for all of our benefit. We have more than 100,000 participants. That includes all of us. It includes all current active clergy, regardless of percentage of appointment at this point in time. It includes surviving spouses, people with alternate accounts through a divorce or what have you. So through all of that, and lay employees like myself, through all of that, we have a large participant base and a large asset base. And what gets us up in the morning is caring for those who serve by providing investment and benefit services that honor the mission and principles of the United Methodist Church. We're going to speak about retirement. We'll get started into kind of thinking at what point in time in your career, in your life, in your ministry will you retire, and then how that ties back into the book of discipline. So the provisions for retirement. There is a normal retirement provision. Normal retirement, everything's vested, accrued, ready for you to receive benefits. That's age 65 or 40 years of service. So if you only have 35 years of service, but you're age 65, normal form, normal retirement. If you're 62, but you have 40 years of service, then normal retirement. And the next level is early retirement. And this is age 62 or 30 years of service. Again, the word "or" is in there. If you're 60 or you're 58 with 30 years of service, you can have early retirement. But if you're age 62 with maybe only 25 years of service, you can still have early retirement. And when I talk about the benefit under the Clergy Retirement Security Program and the defined benefit annuity, I'll come back to how the early retirement provision can come into play. There's a mandatory retirement age of age 72. And for those in ministry who have attained 20 years of service, but their ministry or their career takes them somewhere else, and they're, say, let's say in their mid-50s, but they have 20 years, they can go into a retirement appointment. But if you have a 20-year retirement, you have to wait until you attain age 62, which is back to the early retirement provision, to begin to receive your benefits, except for your UMPIP. That's your account balance. This is the current schematic, if you will, of the retirement plans. You can see the Clergy Retirement Security Program right there on top. That is the current employer-provided retirement plan. I'll get into why there are two time frames there. Before the Clergy Retirement Security Program was the employer-provided plan, the ministerial pension plan was. It's an account balance plan where an amount of contribution was being put into accounts for future retirement income. And then those, and I don't think it applies to this audience, but those who may have started in ministry, in service before 1982, there is also a plan there, but simply this plan provides an annuity in retirement, a life and 70% survivorship annuity. I'll touch on that again very briefly later on. And then on the right-hand side here, we have the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan, the UMPIP. And hopefully all of you are participating in this plan, and we'll go through that in some retirement concepts, some pension concepts, as you go through the UMPIP. So the current plan, employer-provided Clergy Retirement Security Program. And for a person like me who's been in retirement their whole career, this is a very interesting retirement arrangement in that it's actually two retirement plans in one. It's a hybrid retirement plan. You have there on the left-hand side the defined benefit. It's a formula benefit that will provide for you an annuity. It's a traditional pension. But we also have a defined contribution account, which is supplemental employer contributions going into an account in your name, invested in the Wespath funds, to provide for you supplemental retirement income from those account balances. The defined benefit piece, that first circle there on the left-hand side, it is not a balance. It's not an account that's in the investment funds that's experiencing all the volatility right now. It is a formula benefit. And there's three variables to the formula benefit. We'll go through them and we multiply those three variables or factors together and generate an amount and then provide an annuity from that. The formula is made up of the denominational average compensation, or DAC, or DAC. We love our acronyms in the retirement world and the health and welfare world. We love our acronyms. You're going to hear them throughout. We have the denominational average compensation. Then there is a retirement factor, and this is getting into why there's two rows on that prior table of the CRISP, the 07 and 13, and then the post 13. There's two factors. The first time frame, 1.25% is used. In the latter time frame, 1% is used. And then your credited years of service for the period involved relative to those two CRISP time frames that are there. So your months and years of service continue to get counted and then get applied toward the calculation of your benefit. The denominational average compensation is kind of what the words are telling us. It is average compensation of all full-time appointed clergy over the number of full-time appointed clergy, and we come up with an amount. That's last year's amount. This year's amount for the retiree class of 2022, the amount was $75,570 as the denominational average compensation. This also applies to the comprehensive protection plan benefits we'll get into. So you have the DAC here. And then next year, we already know it. We calculated a year in advance. It's going to be $76,221 for 2023. So that's the DAC, or denominational average comp. Then we have the factors, as I indicated. When the plan first rolled out in 2007, the retirement factor was 1.25%. General Conference of 2012 reduced that retirement factor to 1%. And hence, you see the two time frames involved in the CRSP-DB benefit. And then we have our credited service. The slides that I'm using this afternoon are the slides that we use for the retiree class of 2022. So what I'm getting at is the first time frame is going to be 7 years, 2007 through 2013. And then the second time frame, the modeling I'm going to show you, the example I'm going to show you, is 8.5 years, because that was up until July 1st of this year, 2022. So within that time frame of 07 through 13, there are 7 years of service. We're doing the math on those 3 factors just reviewed. The denominational average compensation at the time of retirement, the 1.25% in that first time frame, and then for people who were credited full-time appointed service in that time frame, that's 7 full years. So the DAC times the factor times the credited service comes up with an amount that you can see here on this next slide. We come up with an amount, we divide by 12, and that's an estimated amount of monthly annuity income that can be received from that first time frame. Then we have the second period of time, that post 2013 until retirement. So for this year's class of 2022, 8.5 years, if they're fully appointed through that time frame, was the amount of credited service going into retirement. We do the math again. Same denominational average compensation. It's the DAC of the year you retire. And then 1%, because that's when it got reduced down to 1%, was effective January 1, 2014, and then the 8.5 years of service. In this time frame, we're doing the math again. The DAC times the 1%, 8.5, come out with the amount, divide by 12, and we come up with 535. And then we just add them together. We got the first time frame of 551, second time frame of 535. It comes down to $1,086 per month. But there are several things that will impact the ultimate amount of monthly income you will receive. We're going to go through the annuity options that you're going to be able to elect. So this is going to generate income in the form of a monthly payment. It's an annuity payment that you and your spouse cannot outlive. There's also going to be a COLA percentage, a cost of living adjustment, annual cost of living adjustment. I'm going to review with you that can impact the amount that you're going to receive on the benefit. But also, as I indicated earlier, there is the early retirement provision. So we talked about normal retirement, 40 years or age 65, early retirement, 62 or 30 years of service. The way the defined benefit works within the CRSP for somebody who wants to retire early and they're eligible to retire early, for each month of early retirement, there is a 0.05% reduction in the amount of income that's going to get generated. So for example here, it's somebody who's 63, does not have 40 years of service, has 2 full years of early retirement. And we can see, well, 0.05% for each month of early retirement, that comes to 6% a year. It's 2 years early retirement, so it's 12%. So you can see in the example, the amount that we calculated as the annuity will be reduced by that 12% and come up with a net amount of monthly income. Now, one of the things to think about here is, why the reduction? And the reduction is in place because you're now getting paid out for a longer period of time. So it just kind of makes that actuarial adjustment so that you're kind of in the same place. You're still whole, but you got out a little earlier, so we make that adjustment. But something else to point out to you, and again, I know you're probably a long way from retirement, but just so that you know, within the context of early retirement and that reduction, if you wait until you attain age 65, so you wait the 2 years, you don't take your benefit, then at age 65, normal retirement, you take that CRSP defined benefit, you won't experience the reduction. It's still calculated as of your age 63 with the DAC in that year with the appropriate factors. It still comes out to 1,086, but you'll receive that amount at that time. No COLA, no increase in it, but you don't get the decrease. So this is where financial planning, retirement income planning can come into place relative to the timing of beginning to receive your benefits. So that's the first part of the clergy retirement security program. It's the annuity that gets generated off of the formula of the denominational average compensation, your credited years of service, and then that appropriate retirement factor. Not exposed to market conditions, and for those who have attained normal retirement and you're going into retirement, there's no reason not to take this benefit because you're just leaving that on the table. It's really not going to change. So we encourage people who are getting close to that to look at it in that context. But now we also have the account balance field or account balance defined contribution part of the CRSP. And this gets funded by an automatic 2% non-matching required employer contribution off of your compensation that goes into this CRISP DC account. And then if you are contributing 1% or more, hopefully, but if you're contributing 1% into the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan, you receive an additional 1% match. So that's 3% that's going into the account to help supplement your retirement income through this account balance that's made available to you. In the context of the UMPIP, and we'll go through this in more detail, you have certain participant contribution accounts that you are eligible for. There's the before tax account, there's a Roth account, and an after tax account. So if you're contributing to one or maybe a combination of those accounts and you're up more than 1%, you're going to receive that additional 1% CRSPDC match. Now, this is a defined contribution account. It is invested in the Wespath funds. You can self-manage your investment of these funds. You can determine if you're comfortable with the markets and equities and bonds and those types of financial instruments. You're able to go in and allocate and change as you go through your ministry how you want these accounts to be invested. And then there's this program, Life Stage Investment Management, where you're asking us to tailor an investment allocation for you and to manage it through your ministry and actually through retirement as well. This is available as a cash distribution. This is an account balance. It's your account. You can determine how, when, and how much income you want to receive from that account. And now, this isn't necessarily a retirement webinar. It's more just an overall review of the plans, but you're going to hear about several options that will be available to you when you go into retirement to receive this account. We have another program where you ask us to tailor monthly installments for you. You can self-manage monthly installments for yourself. You can do all kinds of things within the context of the regulations in place to have that account work for you as you like. You can roll it over to UMPIP. That kind of happens automatically anyway. When you take your defined benefit, it goes to UMPIP. It stays invested as it is, so there's no harm, no foul. You can roll it over to another retirement plan. We're not getting much into tax efficiency strategies today, but always recall that in ministry right now, you have the housing allowance tax exclusion available to you. That housing allowance tax exclusion remains available to you in retirement. So that will carry forward from your accounts with Wespath. If you roll that out to another retirement plan, it is highly unlikely that you'll be able to get that housing allowance declaration out of that other investment vehicle unless it's another church pension plan. So it's a little foreshadowing for later on thinking, but know in your planning that that housing allowance tax exclusion will apply for the income you receive in retirement. If you decide that you don't need the CRCCMadang account going into retirement, you're going to leave it invested, defer it on account until such a time that you want to receive it, and you happen to attain age 72 along the way, then you'll have to take required minimum distributions. The IRS steps in and says, okay, tax deferral's gone on long enough. We need to start taking some distributions out, creating some tax activity. And if there's anything left in that account before or after retirement, anything in that account will go to your named designated beneficiaries. That gets us through the Clergy Retirement Security Program. That is the current employer retirement account that is made available to you. It's got the two pieces, the defined benefit, defined contribution formula, annuities. We're going to get into annuities soon. Formula generates the annuities and then the account balance that you get from the CRCCMadang. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions right now. I'm not really doing a question box or anything. I'm on my own today, but if anybody has any questions, or I can just continue to proceed. So the next plan, or the plan that was in place prior to the Clergy Retirement Security Plan, was the Ministerial Pension Plan. This is an account balance plan. This was a plan that was funded for those who were in ministry prior to 2007, where a percentage of your compensation was put into an account, 11% or 12% that was put into an account. It's invested in the Wespath funds, but the Ministerial Pension Plan account is by definition managed by this program, Life Stage Investment Management. Because it's an employer-provided benefit intended to provide long-term retirement income for you, we kind of put more of a conservative tilt to how we allocate and how we invest this money for the long term, the sustainability of the account. So we're tailoring the account based on age, risk tolerance, and other variables I'll review. So someone who's 40 years old right now is going to be completely allocated differently than somebody who is getting to be maybe 60 years old right now. The plan itself as an account balance plan, there are two features to that as well. So it's another bit of a hybrid type of thing that is going on. 65% of the account balance, when you go into retirement and you elect to receive this particular benefit, 65% of the account balance on that day will go and buy an annuity or purchase an annuity. And then the remaining 35% becomes an account balance that kind of joins up with that CRCCMadang account balance, where you can provide retirement income when, how, and how much you want to derive. So we have the 65% of this Ministerial Pension Plan account balance. You're going to have annuities from that. There's going to be 6 lifetime annuities that we're going to review. And then there's an annual cost of living increase that will apply to the Ministerial Pension Plan annuity, as well as your CRCCMadang annuity. And then with that 35%, again, it's an account balance that you can determine how you want to receive that money in retirement. You'll have plenty of options that you'll hear about as you get closer to your actual retirement. Flexibility, options, not getting locked into too many programs. That's a key part of how we handle the account balance part in retirement. A lot of flexibility. Again, you're going to see the annuity. You're going to see the COLA options that we're going to review. With the Ministerial Pension Plan, this is an account balance plan. If you recall what I said about this Clergy Retirement Security Program's defined benefit, it's a formula benefit. Once you're fully accrued to receive the benefit, you're going into retirement, just go ahead and take it because you're not going to really change much. Well, with the account balance, and we're seeing that now again with the market volatility of this year, you don't have to take the Ministerial Pension Plan account going into retirement. You can leave it on account and let it continue to grow. And then when you attain age 72, that's when we step in and say, okay, now you need to start taking that annuity. These required minimum distributions kick in. But again, more flexibility and options available to you. And you can treat the 65% and the 35% different. You can roll that 35% to UMPIP and defer that 65% to another day to get the annuity, or you can go ahead and grab that annuity right away and put that 35% in UMPIP and not use any of that. So again, flexibility and options. The 35%, this is one where you actually physically tell us to roll it over to UMPIP, but it's very simple to do on benefit access at that time. Come to the account balance, it's in the plan for you. And again, you can roll it over to another retirement plan. Just be mindful of the tax consequences that could occur as a result of that. So we've talked about the CRCCDB generating an annuity, the MPP 65% generating an annuity. An annuity is a series of monthly payments. For Wespath, it's a series of monthly payments. These are payments that you cannot outlive. You, if you are married, you and your spouse cannot outlive. Okay, we have joint survivor annuity options you're going to hear about, as well as single life annuity options you're going to hear about. But the thing is, you'll have some options on receiving this monthly payment from the CRCCDB, the Ministerial Pension Plan, 65%, and you and your spouse cannot outlive this benefit. Someone will receive a benefit until both of you are gone. And when both of you are gone, no one will receive any benefit from this portion of the plan benefits. The account balance is, yes, designated beneficiaries, but this is just for the clergy person, and spouse. As I indicated earlier, there are 6 forms of annuities, and they break down into 2 categories: life and survivorship annuities, and then single life annuities. So here in front of you, you can see an example. These numbers don't apply to anyone or any particular person or any year or anything like that, but they are actuarially run. So the numbers actually are rational in terms of what you're seeing, but it's not one individual's example. The 3 annuity types that you can see: life and 100, life and 85, and life and 70%. And then you can see the amount that's payable to you. So if you look down at the life and 70%, you can see that of those amounts payable to you, that is the highest amount that comes to you in the form of annuity. And then the surviving spouse or contingent annuitant would receive the 70%. So you go into retirement, getting your annuity, the COLA will review applies. You pass away before your spouse would receive 70% of that annuity at that time, and whatever COLA percentage you attach. But you can go to a life in 85 or a life in 100. And as you can see with these numbers, the higher the survivorship percentage you elect, the lower the initial amount to you, but the higher the amount that goes to the contingent annuity. And you can see with life in 100, it's the same. Again, this is financial planning, retirement income planning. I'm going to talk about EY financial planning services throughout the course of this session. It's probably the first time I'm bringing them up now, but they are that group that we work with that provides free, in a sense, free financial planning consulting services for all of us at Wespath. And we'll hear more about EY as we go along. But for the life and survivorship annuities, you will have 3 options: the life in 100, the life in 85, the life in 70. Then you'll be able to model and work with EY, your own advisor, as well as the benefit access to see how those numbers look out in the future. Then there's the single life annuity, life annuities. And there's 3 of these as well. Now for the single life annuity, I'm going to come back to a bit of an exception, but for the single life annuity, basically is individual is single going in to purchase an annuity, and they also will have options. If that individual wants just a single life, pure life annuity, they can go ahead and they can elect that, put the COLA percentage alongside it, and they'll receive that for the rest of their life. But once they are gone, no one receives any further benefit. But we do provide the options for individuals who may have somebody in their life that's very important to them, that if something tragic was to happen to them, they would be able to provide some income to them until a period of time has expired. So what you can see here is a life with a 5-year certain and a life with a 10-year certain single life annuity option. So what this means is, let's say you are somebody going into retirement, they're supporting their niece going through college. What they'll do is they'll set up a single life annuity and they'll say, I want a 5-year certain window. And if I pass away within that 5 years, for the remainder of that year, those years, that individual, that named designated beneficiary, will receive that annuity benefit till the end of the 5-year window, and then no one receives any additional benefit. So you choose this one, you go in, after year 3, you pass away, the remaining 2 years, that identified individual will receive the benefit. And then we also have the 10-year certificate. This could be a different situation. Maybe it's a medical reason of somebody in the family or what have you. But you have the 10-year window. You go into retirement, say year 6, you pass away, for the remaining 4 years, someone, that individual you name, will receive that benefit. And then after that 10-year period of time, no benefit would be received by anyone. And if the actual annuitant clergy person exceeds 5 years, exceeds the 10 years in their own right, and then passes away, no one would receive any benefit there either. One other note that gets into financial planning and all, with the proper documentation, consent, and waiver form, a married clergy person can elect a life-only or a life annuity, one of these life annuities, if they so choose. It's just that the spouse has to sign a waiver and consent form. Once we have that on file, then that individual is able to go ahead and elect a single life, even though they are a married individual. The exception to that is that 2007 to 2013 CRSP period, that if you're married, that will generate a surviving spouse annuity. So again, I don't want to be going too fast. We have 6 annuities: life in 100, life 85, life in 70. Then we have the life annuities, pure single life annuity. And then we have the ability for, in a 5-year window or a 10-year window, if something tragic was to happen, someone to receive a benefit for a period of time, and then no further benefit there. And as I've indicated, there is also this annual cost of living adjustment that will apply, that you'll elect to apply to your annuity. And this is one of those things that will impact the amount that you'll receive from your annuity, similar to whatever you choose here. You can see those numbers change by virtue of that first model that I provided to you. The interesting thing here is the ministerial pension plan. You can actually do a 0% COLA. So you elect 0% and you don't get any increase after that. But the COLAs are 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5%. The clergy retirement security program has a minimum of 2%, but you can do 3, 4, or 5. The ministerial pension plan, you can have it be just that 0%. The percent you choose is the increase that's going to impact the amount of annuity payment that you receive. But similar to the survivorship percentage being higher and the lower amount coming out to you, the higher the COLA percentage that you elect going into retirement, the lower the amount initially to you, but down the road, a higher or greater amount of income will be generated for you. So I have a slide here that'll kind of demonstrate that for you visually. So let's just say someone does the normal form of benefit. We call the life in 70%, 2% COLA, a normal form of benefit. That's where most of our clergy persons actually land. These numbers here, again, on the left-hand side and on the bottom are illustrated only. If someone goes into retirement, they're getting about $1,700 a month. They have a 2% COLA. You can see how that goes up. But again, the higher the percentage, the lower the amount. So let's say someone elects through retirement planning, working with an EY, an advisor, hey, let's go with a 4% COLA. We know we're going to have a reduced amount now going into retirement, but some 10, 12, 13 years out, we're actually getting more income month over month, year over year from having that higher COLA percentage. Again, retirement planning, longevity in your life, maybe you want to start out a little lower to get some income later on. Well, the ministerial pension plan, this is a kind of a technique where you might defer Social Security for a few years to take advantage of the MPP annuity. So you get 0%, but just notice that 0% is that red line. It's straight. It's a fixed annuity for the remainder of time. So that just kind of differentiates the life in 2%, getting a higher COLA, or just keeping it as it is. And then you can also see that we have the other 5%, 4%, 3% that you can see as the COLA percentage and what that does. That crossover line is variable, so I wouldn't say everybody's going to cross over, at age 76, but you can see that over time, with compounding of that COLA percent, you will receive a higher benefit. As I indicated before, the ministerial pension plan came along. There was the pre-82 plan. This is a plan that generates an annuity. If you're married, it's a life and 70% annuity, no COLA. If you have an account balance and from in created to, and it actually generates a higher amount of annuity, we'll give you that, or we apply a formula, one or the other. Either way, an annuity gets generated for those individuals who, and we still have some, who will have pre-82 plan account balances in play. And then we'll speak about the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan, UMPIP or UMPIP. Like I said, we love our acronyms. This is a defined contribution 403B plan. In the secular world, very similar to a 401k plan, but here, not-for-profit, nonprofit, it is a 403. It is employer sponsored, and that the employer must sponsor the UMPIP for you to participate in it, but that's all worked out, obviously, within the annual conferences and all of that. You are contributing, hopefully all of you are contributing from your pay, each pay period, an amount that goes into the UMPIP. We'll go through different ways it can come in. You're in the Wespath funds, and you're accumulating all of that through the course of time to generate retirement income. You're going to hear about different ways to contribute. There's a couple of different types of accounts that you can contribute to. It impacts taxes now, taxes later, a little bit of both if you set it up that way. And in some instances, the UMPIP can be elected by the employer to provide more supplemental contributions to their staff if they so choose. But really, for today's purposes, participant contributions, it's contributions that are coming from your payroll per payroll period, going into an account balance or like an account type that you elect. In terms of how much to contribute from your paycheck, you have two options. There's a form that I'm sure you've all seen by now where you make those elections. And you can do a percentage of pay or a flat dollar amount of pay. We will honor both. We, however, recommend doing a percentage of your compensation going into the plan because your cash flow situation may be such that you're not really ready to increase the amount that you're putting in the plan. But if you get a raise, you get a wage increase, that percentage against that wage increase is going to automatically be putting more dollars on a per payroll period basis into the account. If you left it at $200 a month and you got a wage increase, you'd have to remember to go back in and make that $210 or $215 a month. And I kind of know from experience that a lot of times inertia kicks in. People say they're going to do it, maybe not get around to it, maybe many months later get around to it. So kind of a pitch for a percentage approach so that even if you're not really able to increase it, as you get wage increases, more is going in for you. And these are going into the Wespath funds. And here, as I indicated earlier with other accounts, you can self-manage your account where you determine using our funds, how you want the money allocated or invested. And you have life stage investment management, which I'll review with you, where we tailor the investment for you, the allocation for you. With the ways to contribute, there's several, we have 3 money types, 4 money types that you can contribute into. One is a rollover account. We'll get to kind of handle that separately. But you have the election to decide to use the before tax contribution account, the Roth contribution account. Since the introduction to Roth, the after-tax contribution account isn't used as much, but there's opportunity for that, which I'll review with you. So you have these accounts that you elect per payroll period going into the account for you. And then we'll talk about rollovers, which is really qualified employer retirement money coming over in one tranche into the UMPIP, rolling it over into the plan, consolidating your retirement assets. The before tax contribution is just that. Come in with your gross pay, and I have a table down the road I'm going to show you. It kind of gives an illustration, but you come in with your gross pay, then the contribution comes out, then the taxes come out wherever you are in the country relative to state taxes, but federal taxes, SECA taxes, all of that gets applied. But the contribution comes out, you get a net amount of pay, and then that is where the taxes get applied. With the Roth account, it's considered an after-tax account, but it's a very interesting account. Whereas you come in with the before tax account with a dollar amount, we calculate an amount, and we apply the tax. With the Roth account, you come in with the gross amount, we calculate the amount of Roth contribution, but we keep that in the overall amount for tax purposes and take the taxes out of the whole thing. Then put that dollar amount calculated as Roth into the account. And by doing that, you're paying taxes on like the front end. You're giving the government tax monies now, and the contribution dollars are going into the account. But what the IRS says, what the law says, is that if you have a qualified Roth contribution account, which simply means you're over age 59 and a half, and the very first Roth contribution into the account is 5 years old or older, then it becomes a qualified, tax qualified Roth account. And if it's a tax qualified Roth account, then what you take as distributions in retirement comes out tax free from that Roth account. So before tax, it's a salary reduction contribution. It goes into the account. It's taxable. It has earnings that's taxable. The Roth contribution goes into the account. Taxes have already been taken care of. Contribution dollar amount never gets taxed again. And the earnings, because you've already front loaded taxes, come out tax free. As I said, this is a UMPIP 403B plan, defined contributions. Defined contribution because the IRS laws, regulations dictate to us the defined amount that you can contribute in any given calendar year. So for 2022, the amount that can go into the before tax, Roth, or combined, you can do both at the same time, as long as it does not exceed, if you're under age 50, $20,500. That's the limit for this year. If you're age 50 and over, you can contribute an additional $6,500 as a catch-up contribution. So that gets you into 2022 of being able to contribute to these accounts $27,000. Now, another layer of contribution limits is the combined amount the employer puts in and the combined amount the employee puts in cannot exceed this year's $61,000. These dollar amounts get indexed every year based on cost of living, I believe. So I would imagine we're going to see increases going into next year. And we should start to see those numbers mid to late October. So we'll find out what the numbers are for next year. These are the contribution limits for this year. Again, defined contribution plan, that's kind of what it's getting at. Now, when you look at these amounts, they're pretty aggressive amounts. I'll be the first one to admit it. But some individuals and some households have the opportunity to meet that amount during the course of the calendar year. And if they do, and there's still some leeway for more contributions to come into the plan just from the pay, that's when you can take advantage of the after-tax contribution account. That before tax and or Roth has hit the limit, but you haven't hit the overall $61,000 limit, you can start to contribute after-tax contributions into that account. And here, it's the amount, all the taxes come out, then we calculate the amount that goes into your UMPIP account. The contribution dollar amount never gets taxed again, it's already been taxed. But the earnings on that will be taxed just by virtue of the timing of when the taxes were taken from that pay to generate this contribution account. With the rollovers are where if you have other qualified retirement accounts and you want to consolidate into the UMPIP. And we do kind of recommend that you do that just because you're looking after it, we'll be looking after it. Prior employer, no offense to them, they're not required to actually look after it as long as it's invested appropriately. So they will go ahead and do that. So rolling over into UMPIP, you work with us. It's called a direct rollover. We have an incoming rollover form. You contact our staff contacts the current holder of those retirement accounts. We do a direct rollover that goes into the UMPIP plan. That rollover will be made available to you actually as an in-service distribution before age 59 and a half, and then certainly in retirement. If any of that prior qualified employer work time has been in the ministry of the gospel, then give us documentation to support that, and we will put that in an account that is eligible for the housing allowance tax exclusion. But if it's an old 401k or a governmental 457 plan or an IRA, you can just roll that in, put that in there, and we'll know what applies to housing allowance and what does not apply to the housing allowance. Okay, so that is a way in which you can kind of consolidate and kind of equally manage with us and yourself any other retirement accounts that you may have. Comes from 401k, 457, IRAs. Roth IRAs are not eligible to roll over, but for Roth 401k, Roth 403B are eligible to roll. You will have access to your accounts. Obviously, in retirement, you'll certainly have access to the accounts. And as I've hinted at, you'll hear about several options that will be made available to you. You can use a program we have where the account balances sit in the funds, and then we provide monthly installment payments for you. It's called Life Stage Retirement Income. You can self-manage your installments. You can call us once a year and get the amount that you need to get out. Over 72, requiring minimum distribution, all of that. However, if you're still in ministry and you're below, you're not retiring yet, you can take in-service withdrawals out. If you're the in-service withdrawal applies if you're age 59 and a half or older. So what that gets to is, these are retirement accounts. If you're under age 59 and a half and you take a distribution from a retirement account, it's not only subject to ordinary income taxes, there's a 10% tax penalty attached to that as well. However, if you're over age 59 and a half, and I have no idea how they derive 59 and a half, but if you're over age 59 and a half and you take a distribution out of your UMPIP, still subject to ordinary income taxes, but there is no 10% penalty. In-service withdrawals of your rollover account does not have a 10% penalty. It's your prior ones. For those who are under age 59 and a half looking to access the UMPIP account, it has to be for a hardship reason. A hardship means purchase of a primary residence or trying to avoid foreclosure of the primary residence, medical expenses, college tuition expenses, funeral expenses. There's about 8 or 9 reasons, and working with our participant solutions area, they'll work with you to get that sorted out. We get documentation and we can provide for you a hardship withdrawal from your UMPIP account. Again, 10% penalty on top of ordinary income taxes will apply, but we'll work with you to determine the amount of tax exposure you have and bring up the total amount coming out as that withdrawal to get you to the dollar amount that you're looking for and need, so the taxes are handled in that calculation. But there's hardship loans, which I'm going to go to next, but also for those who are in UMPIP who have long-term disability, you can access your account without that 10% penalty. If you separate service or you retire and you're in retirement, obviously you have access to it. But a separation of service, this is your account. You have access to it. There's certain rules and regulations around age and all of that that may come into play, so talk to an advisor. But certainly you have access to that account. And again, you can roll it out if you want to choose to do something like that. But in the instance where, again, we have the ability to take withdrawals out over age 59 and a half, then get a hardship withdrawal, which is for specific reasons, and you have to document it, and it's taxable with a penalty. We also have hardship loans. So let's say that from a monthly cash flow position, you are able to afford to take a loan repayment into your debt obligations on a given month, on your monthly flow and all of that, and you have the need for a loan, that you want to take a loan or withdrawal, you decide you're going to take a loan out of your account balances, you can do so with Wespath. There are rules and regs, obviously, that wrap around these hardship loans. You're allowed to take up to 50% of your vested account balance, but the maximum that you can have is $50,000. That $50,000 actually gets carried over for a 12-month period. So it's in the last 12 months, $50,000. We have 2 durations of outstanding loans. If you're using it to purchase a primary residence, and we'll need documentation on that score, but if you're using it to purchase a primary residence, you can amortize that loan up to 15 years. Have that loan spread out up to 15 years. But for any other reason than the purchase of a primary residence, it's called a general purpose loan, and you can have that loan amortized for 5 years. It doesn't have to be 5 years, it can be 3 years, but you have a 5-year period of time to do that. You're taking the money out of your plan. It's not experiencing investment gains in the investment funds. You've used it for some other purpose. You're paying this amount back. We do apply an interest rate to that. And it's a way in which you can kind of regenerate some of the earnings that you lost by taking that money out of the accounts. Our plan is set up where we look at the prime rate, and we add 2% to the prime rate. The last number I saw was the prime rate was 4.75%. So our loans are 6.75%. But as we know, interest rates are kind of moving on a regular basis now. So, it may be higher if you were to go take a look at doing a loan over the weekend or something. But we keep pace with the prime rate by 2%. When we set this up, we will have an electronic fund transfer document that's a part of all of this. You'll give us your banking information, and we'll just come and take that loan repayment out of your bank each month. And just to let you know, this loan provision that you have right now in ministry, you also will have in retirement. So down the road in retirement, you need to take money out, but you can kind of afford to pay it back. You'll still have the loan provision available to you. And the last thing is a cautionary loan defaults. And with the loan default, what happens there is you come in, you take out the loan, you're starting to pay off the loan, but you realize you actually can't repay that loan anymore, and you stop repaying the loan. And there's a whole series of months tests that gets put into play, but after like 6 months of no repayment, then we consider it to be a distribution. We take the remaining amount of the loan, process it as a distribution, and then ordinary income taxes and the tax penalty of 10% would apply in that instance, unless you're over 59. But for loan default, if you're going to take a loan compared to a withdrawal, again, run some modeling, EY financial planning, always available to you, your own advisor, or what have you. So some considerations, a few conceptual things to review relative to retirement savings. And this kind of applies to UMPIP, but conceptually it does apply across the board. The first is, again, the tax efficiency planning that you can apply in determining what account type do I want to contribute into. With the before tax contribution, if you elect a dollar amount, and my example here is 166.67, if you elect that as a before tax contribution, what you'll see is you're bringing home more pay, $45.50 here. But if you do the Roth contribution account, you're bringing home less, but you get all of that earnings down the road coming out as a distribution tax free. So the example here that we have, $50,000 annual salary, 8% contribution rate, and we'll deal with the clergy on the right-hand side with the CRCCM. The $50,000 by 12, it comes out to $2,083.33. And we've calculated an amount of $166.67 as I'm going to go all the way to the right-hand side. $166.67 is the before tax 8% contribution amount. It reduces that $2,083 to $1,916. Then the taxes get applied. CRCCA gets applied. Federal tax gets applied. You see you have a net amount of what you're going to receive as pay, and it is $45.50 higher than if it was a Roth contribution. So that's going to be bringing home more pay. Sounds good. However, some people might want to take advantage of the Roth. So with the Roth, the 8% is still applied to the gross pay amount. So it's still $166.67. But we're applying the CRCCA and the federal taxes at the overall gross pay amount as well. So you can see more is coming out in taxes, but that $166.67 is still the same amount. It's going into the Roth contribution account where the dollars won't get taxed again, and then your earnings won't get taxed again. So in the short term, you're bringing home less money, but in the longer term, you have the benefit of the earnings. Now, for clergy persons and the use of the Roth account, it's an interesting conversation to have. And it's an interesting conversation to have because you have the housing allowance tax exclusion available to you in retirement. But you can get into some interesting planning here. Younger people, and I'm not trying to categorize people, but younger people still kind of dealing with kids and all of that, they may want that extra take-home pay. So you're putting it in before tax, no harm, no foul. It's going to get taxed later. But you have the housing allowance. It's going to take some, maybe even all of that, and not have any of it be taxed. But as you get later on, but you're still a good few years away from retirement, you can use an advisor and say, hey, with all the employer-provided accounts that I'm going to have, my CRSP, DB annuity, my MPP annuity, there's other things that are going to come down the line, the employer-provided side. Am I covered for my housing allowance tax exclusion? And if you are, you may want to consider switching over to Roth at one point in time, because then you can put those dollars in, take a little less home, but now you have another stream of income coming out to you in retirement that's tax-free. So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, but to me it's very interesting in that there are options that you can have where at some point in time, either combining it, doing some Roth, some before tax, going over to Roth may be something to consider. But here you can kind of see how the dollars come into play and how the tax now, the tax later can also come into play. And then we have dollar cost averaging. And this is a big key concept in saving, but certainly in retirement savings. And what we're getting at here is, for our example, each payroll period, someone is giving $500, whatever you're giving right now, $500 going into the fund plan. Markets change all the time. So when you look at the blue line, you can see the share price. And then when you look at the gold line, you can see the number of shares purchased. And what you'll notice is that the lower the blue line, the higher the shares purchased. The higher the blue line, the lower the shares purchased. But over time, markets change, and we're going through that right now. And over long periods of time, you're going to have regular volatility, and then you're going to have this high level of volatility when you're putting in contribution dollars and buying shares at all of these different rates. And what history tells us is that by doing dollar cost averaging, as opposed to putting one lump sum in and leaving it, that you get an internally higher rate of return from your investments, because it's doing that dollar cost averaging, buying low. You're buying low, but then you're buying high, but now you're buying low. And over time, as the markets continue to grow and expand over time, you're kind of taking advantage of that through the dollar cost averaging. So, just know that for people right now who may be a little concerned with the markets and all, if you've got a long runway yet still to be worrying about retirement income, and you're continuing to put those in, putting them into a depressed market, it's kind of a cliche to say you're kind of buying the funds for sale, but you're buying more shares now. Please God, history repeats itself, and we go back to the markets going up, and you're continuing to experience that. And all of that gets into, how is that all going to grow over time? You have the dollars going in, you have your share purchase, you have your share price, and then you have compound accounts growing over time. So here I'm just going to show a graphical representation of what the timing and the amount may look like. Again, it's just some modeling. But we're going to start with a planned compensation for the 25-year-old individual at $35,000, 45 at $65,000. Compensation increases at 3%. Assumed annual rate of return for the funds at 7%. Our first individual here got started at a young age, contributed 1% at age 25, stayed with that 1% at age 25 all the way through to retirement at age 65, and was able to generate an account balance of $102,000. But someone else came in and said, I'm able to do the 4%. You can see the difference in the percentage of what that's doing to the account balance over time. 4% is going in, it's buying the shares. Again, we're baking in the compensation increases and all of that over time. You can see that goes up to $409,000. But this slide is not intended to discourage people who are coming into retirement savings in a more aggressive fashion later on in life. I've experienced in my life where I wasn't able to contribute because I had kids I had to deal with, a household I had to deal with. Then you come back in. As long as you come back in, figure out what you can handle over the course of time, your monthly cash flow and your percentage, continue to try to get that back up again. You can see that you can get a robust amount of account balance simply at age 45, starting a little bit more aggressive, maybe at 6%, because a couple of years or maybe even a decade, you weren't able to contribute. Now you're doing a little catch up, but you can still see that you start to do that. It will pay off for you down the line. There will be an account balance for you down the line. So oftentimes people see this as, oh, I'm too late, why even bother getting into it? That's not the point of this at all. It's just go ahead and get started. When you're ready to get started, think about how aggressive you can get started or how much you can grow over time, but still you're going to see a retirement account available to you. And again, you have the tax efficiency stuff, you have the housing allowance stuff available to you as well. So that gets us to the retirement plans. The CRCCMadang is a formula benefit. The ministerial pension plan is in the Life Savings Investment Management Program, and you have your CRCCMDC and your UMPIP also in the Wespath family of funds. So I'm going to take some time to go through the funds and then life stage. So we have benefits of investing with Wespath. One of them is sustainable investing. And that really means two things. One is sustainability over the long haul. And we've proven we're around for 115, 120 years. we're well situated today with every intent of paying out into the future, that we maintain that sustainability of providing retirement income benefits to clergy persons and lay employees. But it also means upholding the values of the UMC, the sustainability, the environmental, social, and governance principles that we apply in our investment. We apply that into investing. I'm sure you're very familiar with all of that and how we structure ourselves philosophically relative to setting ourselves up in the investment markets, who we will purchase, what we will purchase and what we won't, and how we position things. Both of those things in tandem give us long-term sustainability and also the ability to uphold the values of the UMC. I'm going to review the funds with you. You'll see they are diversified investment options. There are several investment options ranging from capital preservation, which is what it means, not much interest. And then we have equity funds, we have bond funds of varieties. So we'll go through those. So it's diversified in and of itself. We have competitive returns. We don't pay out any commissions or expense ratios to anybody. We're not, somebody comes in and finds another, church or school or what have you. Nobody's getting paid for that. That all stays within the funds as it should. But we do compare ourselves to peers in the marketplace. So we do benchmark. So we'll look at our funds and how our funds are set up at U.S. equity, international equity, bond fund, and we'll compare ourselves through benchmarking to other like funds to see how we're doing in the marketplace, and we do just fine on a competitive basis. And certainly one of the reasons is because we have low expense ratios because we have low costs on top of managing those funds. And then we have live stage. To just kind of gallop through the investment categories and funds that we have, you can see that we have the capital preservation fund. It's our stable value fund. Stable value fund, it's a very, very conservative fund. Talk to an investment advisor. You're thinking about going into it. You still have a long runway to retirement, but certainly for people going into and through retirement, the stable value fund, it is a low interest, low return type of fund, but it certainly has, it plays out in retirement to hedge against market volatility to ensure there's income in those accounts to continue to get generated. And then we have the income funds. Income funds are bond funds, debt obligation instruments that governments and companies put out into the marketplace that people buy up and manufacture some of these investment funds. We have 3 bond funds. We have the inflation protection fund, the fixed income fund, and the extended term fixed income fund. The inflation protection fund is a fund in the bond marketplace. The intent of that fund is to keep pace with the rate of inflation with a little bit more on top of it, but basically just continue to maintain the rate of inflation throughout the course of that fund investment. The fixed income fund is a huge fund. It's our second largest fund. Here we will get bonds of different countries across the globe, as well as companies across the globe, and put them into this fund and manage it that way. It could be long bonds, 30-year bonds. It could be 2-year notes. It could be sovereign bonds. It could be U.S. treasuries, all of that blended together. And then the last is the extended term fixed income fund. And these 3, the level of risk kind of goes with it, right? So inflation protection and fixed income. The extended term would be the highest risk bond fund that we have, and that's because we're buying bonds that are on the long-term horizon in the bond market. So 30-year bonds, 10-year bonds. Nobody really understands what they're going to be worth down the road, so you get a higher level of risk and a higher level of potential return. But that we're just kind of in that segment of the bond market for that particular fund. If you would look to the bottom of this one first, this slide, we have the equity funds. We have 2 stock funds, company stock funds, like Apple and Siemens and all of that. The U.S. equity fund, again, the words are telling us there what's happening. It is U.S.-based domestic companies that we are purchasing to put into this fund. But they're not all the large growth funds. They're large, they're mid, they're small cap type of funds, of companies that we put in there, as well as what they call growth, which is kind of the aggressive ones, and then value. Those companies that the market thinks are undervalued, certainly now the value is probably in play, that they're undervalued and then you think they're going to come back up to a normal level. So we get that in there. We work all of that together in the one U.S. equity fund. The international equity fund is foreign companies, but it's the same concept. Large, medium, small cap, growth and value, but these are coming from Siemens and Sony and Alphabet, maybe those types of international companies that are going into the International Equity Fund. But right back up on top here, we have what we call the Multiple Asset Fund. It's a balanced fund. The charter, if you will, of this particular fund is to always have an equity, stock, income, bond investment fix. So we want a 65% equity exposure, 35% income exposure baked into that one fund. So the diversification that you may be looking for is in that one fund, the multiple asset fund. Here we do it smart. I think it's smart how we do it in that we are using what's called a fund of funds. So as you notice, the 4 funds that are there are the funds that we already have and manage. We just incorporate that into this multiple asset fund. So 35% US equity, 30% international equity. That gets us our 65% equity, 25% fixed income, 10% inflation protection. That gives us the 35% income. So this fund, I mean, it's going to vary obviously over time, but the idea is to keep it in that space of 65-35. Now it'll stay there over the course of time, but still it's an interesting fund for people who are comfortable with being in that type of environment for a long period of time. And then we also have the social value choice suite of funds. These are funds that for participants who have a heightened focus on a company's environmental and social performance. So as indicated, we're a sustainable investment house. ESG, environment, social, and governance issues and principles apply. But these are funds where that's even more enhanced. I believe annual conferences make motions to who to invest in and who not to invest in, and other large agencies and all of that. And that comes into play in terms of how we're using these funds and what we're investing in these funds. If you want to get involved in these funds, the life stage investment management program I'm going to review, they don't come into play there. It's just the core funds that I reviewed a moment ago. From a risk and return perspective, as I was indicating, I was going through it, where there's risk, where there's no risk, you can kind of see that here. You have the return on the left-hand side, you have the risk on the bottom, stable value fund. Very, very low risk, very, very low rate of return or potential rate of return, right? And then you start to go up that little scale there, you get to the middle, you can see that extended term fixed income fund. Again, that's just that longer end segment of the bond market, more risk there. Continue to go up, US equity. The biggest risk is the international equity fund, because obviously countries can have all kinds of things going on that we can't control that could impact their companies, so there's a higher degree of risk there. And this is a historical perspective. Over time, the greater the risk should provide the greater return. However, as we know right now, what's happening in the markets is that high end, that risk end is not returning. It's gone back into a contraction, but history tells us that over time, this will normalize, stabilize, and then continue to play out over the course of the years and decades to come. When it comes to investing, some people are comfortable with it. Again, on that right-hand side, you can choose your own mix. You can determine how you want to use the funds I just reviewed, put your percentages in there, manage that over time. Life stage I'm going to talk about next, but right there in the middle is another conversation around EY financial planning services. Regardless of where you are, you want to do life stage, you want to do your own thing, we recommend calling EY and just talking it out with them. They are experts, they're licensed and credentialed to have these types of conversations. Like myself and my colleagues, we can only go so far because we're not licensed and credentialed, but they are. So they can really go deeper into helping you think through, providing guidance to you as to whether or not you want to self-manage, you want to use life stage, you truly get an understanding of life stage, and then you can continue to manage that with them over time. Life Stage Investment Management is a very interesting program that we have where we are developing a personalized investment management tool. That's what it is, the tool for your defined contribution accounts. The ministerial pension plan is in this program. You have the option for your PISA DC, your UNPIP to put that into Life Stage Investment Management. What we do is we tailor an investment allocation for you based on your age. We look at the book of discipline on the system to what your expected benefit commencement date is. We assume Social Security benefits. We look at other Wespath benefits. Now, right there in the middle is the risk tolerance. You have some flexibility as to how you want to structure life stage investment management for you. If you plan to work into age 72, let us know that, because we're going to apply age 65 as the default, or retirement age. Let us know that. If you're not in Social Security, let us know that. But risk tolerance is really the one where you can make some impact. There's really three as far as investing goes. Are you a conservative investor? Are you a moderate investor? Or are you an aggressive investor? The default position is a moderate risk tolerance for the allocation, but you can tell us, no, I'd rather be conservative, I'd rather be aggressive, and you can change that over time as your situation warrants. We go through all of this and we put your investment allocation on autopilot, and we are managing it from that point on. We have the diversified investment portfolio that's in place for you. We set an allocation and we review it quarterly, and we rebalance your accounts as needed. So what's happening here is actually two very interesting things. First is you go into life stage investment management, you're 40 years old, and we put you in a 90-10 investment allocation, 90 equity, 10% income. Again, you got a long way to retirement. So you could be a moderate investor, but still be weighted that way because it's a retirement. So 90-10. As we age up, so you're going 40 to 50 to 60 to 65, we bring down that amount of equity exposure and bring up the amount of income exposure. So we're reducing the amount in those two stock funds, increasing the amount in the bond funds to get us to, into, and through retirement. So when I do one-on-one benefit education consultations with a 67-year-old individual, I'm looking at 55, 45, maybe even 50-50 if they're 70, because we've been managing that all the way through. You need the equity, you need the growth, you need the risk. But as we're getting actually to the point of retirement and producing income, we need to have a higher amount of income in that account to pay out those installment payments. So we do that all the way through. People who stay with us all the way until they're passing will continue to see that management of that account over time. But what we also do is we rebalance the account. So on a quarterly basis, based on your birthdays, not everybody's happening on the 1st of July. Based on your birthdays, 4 times quarterly off of your birthday, we look at your account and we say, hey, we want you at 90-10, but now you're at 95-5, or you're at 85-15. We'll rebalance the account to get you back to 90 and 10. So we're buying and selling to get you back to where we want you to be. And because we're managing it on an active basis that way throughout the course of the year, history again tells us that you're getting a marginally higher, but an internally higher internal rate of return out of your investments with Wespath using life stage investment management, because we're not just leaving it at 40 at one percentage and at 45 doing another percentage and at 50 doing another percentage. We're actually continuing to manage where we want you to be now with the future in sight at all times. So very complicated, not really quite sure how they're going to pull it off behind the scenes, but that is what's happening with life stage investment management, where we're managing that for you through the long haul. For the ministerial pension plan, again, that's kind of booked into and boxed into this life stage investment management. It's got more of a conservative tilt to it, but it's the employer provided account for annuities and other benefits for you. But you can see on benefit access under the investment summary tab how you're allocated for MPP if you're an MPP, and then also your account balances, the CRCCPC and the UMVIP. And you can make changes to the profile if you so choose. I think the next slide here, right? So we have paperwork, which may have come in the kit. I didn't even mention that, but hopefully you did receive that material in the mail. You can change your risk tolerance on benefit access, but if you don't give us any information, you don't even tell us how you want your contributions to be allocated when you got started with Wespath, we will default you into life stage investment management. We'll default you with a moderate risk tolerance, age 65, normal retirement, and assume you're eligible for Social Security. So again, here you have a few dials if you want to go in and actively take advantage of that. And I'd say most of the participants default into life stage investment management. So, take a look at that. If you're set up, you like it, you're moderate, and that's where you feel you want to be from an investment perspective, that's fine. But again, keep revisiting that over time. Not every year, depending upon how long you are from retirement. But as you get closer and you're talking to an advisor or EY, certainly you want to continue to look at how you're positioned using life stage or do a self-management type of thing. There's no shortage of information on anything really about Wespath and our funds, but certainly on the investments on wespath.org. You have daily changes, so you can see what's happening. These are what they call privately managed funds, but they operate like mutual funds. Right? So they get priced every day. You can see that. We have high-level fund descriptions, executive summaries. We have very, very in-depth investment fund descriptions if you want to look at that. You can see our benchmarking and comparative results, how we're setting ourselves up or looking against our peers. You can also see the fees that apply, but again, we're large without any of these commissions and all of that, so our expense ratios are very low compared to the remainder of the us. Again, more of that means more of the money is staying where it belongs, which is in the funds for all of us to enjoy. That gets us through the conversation around the plans, clergy retirement security program, defined benefit, annuity, defined contribution, account balance. MPP, for those at MPP, 65% annuity now, and then 35% is an account balance. There may be changes to that 65% coming down to the next general conference, but it still will be a benefit provided on a monthly basis from us to you for that 65% in retirement. Then you have the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan. And hopefully all of you are in there and taking advantage of it. Everybody's got their own life situation, but certainly you want that 1% DC match. And I'm going to talk about Compass, which will get you thinking about a higher level if you're not quite there yet. Well, we'll now go to a quick review of the death and disability provisions of the Comprehensive Protection Plan. So in active ministry, there is a death benefit that is provided. And the way this is an amount that is provided depending upon the person on the left-hand side who passes. So I'm going to kind of walk through the left-hand side. So the clergy person passes away, spouse is still with us, the spouse would receive $50,000 as a death benefit because the clergy person passed away. But if the spouse passes before the clergy person will receive 20% of the denominational average compensation at the time of death. So this is where that DAC has another application. It's going to continue to go up, which means death benefits will go up as well. If you have a situation, the clergy person has passed and it's gone to the spouse. The spouse has been around for a while, but now the spouse, who's now the surviving spouse, passes away. The surviving spouse's named designated beneficiaries will receive the benefit of 15% of the DAC at the time of the surviving spouse's death. So you have the clergy person passes before the spouse, and then later on the spouse, as the surviving spouse passes, benefits are provided. And in the heartbreaking situation where a child passes before the clergy person or the surviving spouse, and under certain criteria for child, 10% of the DAC is provided as a benefit at the time of death for the child. And again, in that packet that you should have received should be a sheet that spells this out in a little more detail for you. With the death benefit, that carries over into retirement. Now, there is some eligibility criteria and all, but I think now for most people, CPP is in play, and most people should be eligible for the death benefit in retirement. And it's the same group of people here. You have the clergy person, spouse, surviving spouse, child, but this is a fixed dollar amount, but it gets adjusted over time. The clergy person passes away, $20,808 will be provided as a benefit this year. The spouse passes before the clergy person will receive $15,606. Clergy person passes, you have the spouse, becomes the surviving spouse, that individual passes, named designated beneficiaries get the $10,404. And if a child passes before, an eligible child passes before the surviving spouse or clergy person, that $83.23 is a benefit that gets provided. Now, this benefit does get adjusted over time. Now, working with General Conference right now, it gets increased 2% per 4 years. I think we were able to increase it going into this year. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I do know that in front of General Conference, there is a proposal that says, let's just increase this thing 2% every year, year over year, and not worry about always having to come back to General Conference for that. Not sure how any of these things are going to play out over time, but there's a sense that if it's gone this far, it's probably something that maybe with a modification will go through. But either way, this amount does go up and index over time. There is also a disability benefit that's provided through CPP, and that is for active clergy. This is for long-term disability. It's not short-term disability, it's long-term disability. Some people say permanent disability. There's always the semantics around that as a permanent or long-term. But anyway, if you qualify for long-term disability benefits through CPP, what happens there is your plan compensation at the time that you go into this disability benefit, 70% of that plan compensation will be provided to you as a benefit. Now, what happens is it takes a long period of time for Social Security disability income to come into play. So we'll give you that 70% while you're working to adjudicate Social Security disability income. Then you receive that, you tell us what that amount is, and then we'll reduce the amount that we're paying out of the CPP plan, include that Social Security amount, but we keep you whole at around that 70% level, and that will go up over time. The base plan compensation for people who are disabled is a 3% increase each year, so it's not a fixed amount. That amount will go up 3% each year. Then again, there'll be an offset once the actual Social Security comes in, but still keeping you in that 70% neighborhood. You have to submit an application to be approved, and it must be reapproved over time. This is a very labor-intensive type of thing, is that there are a lot of forms to complete. I used to run a disability program for another church pension board that I worked at, and people get very upset because they're dealing with upsetting things at the time. But to really make sure we're doing our due diligence, good stewardship of our resources, we have to ensure that the medical documentation is all in support of whatever that disabling condition is. And then periodically, and it depends upon the disabling condition, that person will have to get reapproved by just getting their doctor or doctors to resubmit paperwork to our carrier who handles the CPP benefit. The retirement plan, the 2% will continue to go into the CRCCDC, but you should continue to do your 1% to get that additional 1%. So 1% going in off of this hopefully is manageable for those who experience this, but you'll get that 1% additional. And the credit's funded by the conference, so that's all handled in how all this will go through. So you have the disability benefits. You will get 70% of your plan compensation that will go up over time, and some contributions will continue to be placed into your account. You will have access to your account with disability. With the ministerial pension plan, that 35%, if it's some kind of condition where a house may need to be modified, moves may need to be done, that 35% is available to you. Again, it's ordinary income, not subject to the 10% tax, but still you can get that and make whatever changes you would need to make, or whomever would need to make. Your CRCCDC is available to you, and your UNPIP is also available to you without that 10% penalty, but the access is there, and the penalty is not, just to let you know that. And then I kind of touched on this before, but we have the beneficiary designation. Anytime we do a one-on-one consultation with an individual, we'll say it's always good periodically to check your beneficiary designations. People, for young families, when children are born, people change addresses. Social Security's dates of birth can be kind of wrong, like the 3s and 8s get mixed up, those types of things. So it's always good to keep that, every year even, but keep that up to date as time goes on. Because if you do not have good beneficiary designations on file, something tragic happens to you and your spouse, and they're not in good working order, it'll go to your estate, it'll go to probate court in the state in which you live. It'll take a couple of years, and there'll be fees attached before it comes out. And it may not come out the way you want it, but even if it does, it'll come out net of all of that activity to get it there. So periodically, take a look, make sure they are in good working order, and not just your Wespath stuff. Anything your spouse may have work-related, any life insurance you have, other annuities you have, IRAs, just make sure the designation's in good working order. We have a lot of services, a lot of participant services that we provide. Benefit access, obviously, is the portal, the tool, the web platform. On benefit access, we have all kinds of information available to you. We have all the investment fund information, plan information, PDF documents that you can download right then and there to get into the fund descriptions or get into the plan, highlight descriptions, all of that. Your participant quarterly statements are probably electronic now. The PDF, to see that, you can see through benefit access. We have projection tools. I ran a projection, sent that out to you. You can run your own projections on the system and see what the changes are. Different COLA percentages, different life and survivorship percentages. You can kind of see that. And again, there's information in beneficiary designation. You can see them on the system. And again, lots of educational resources there. If you have not, I think this is an old picture, it just says benefit access now, but if you're not on there and you want to enroll yourself, we encourage you that you do that. You come to wespath.org, it's the same red box, it's just one white little area there where it says benefit access, and you go in, you hit the new user registration. In today's world, we're going to go through a series of screens so I can make sure we identify who you are saying who you are. You're going to give us an email and a cell phone number. The cell phone number we'll send an authentication code to. You send that back, and then we'll continue on. And then after that, we'll always ask for an authentication code as you come into your benefit access accounts. Give yourself 10 minutes, like everything else, password, ID, those types of things you want to make sure you have in order and documented as you go forward. You take care of that. Participant quarterly statements, again, they are available by mail, but as we go green and get more efficient electronically, those are probably there available to you on benefit access. And I actually like paper, so I might print them off now and again just to put pencil to them, take a look what's happening, but they are available to you. And for those of you who are in life stage investment management and you're not really sure about it, on these quarterly statements, you can see a lot of inter-fund transfers happening, like this whole table of different things that happen within the account. That's why you see that, because life stage investment manager came along and either did that quarterly review adjustment, or we've aged up to a point where we've made an adjustment relative to the core allocation that we want you to have at that time. The projections that I gave to you, it's an estimate, but for a lot of individuals, they're going out so many years and decades that it's good to know, it's good to see. What we reviewed right now certainly applies to the projection. But we have account growth assumptions in there, we have compensation growth in there, DAC growth assumptions built in there, gives you a sense of what you could receive in retirement. But with the Compass plan I'm going to talk about in a little while, it even gets a little bit more hasty. But it's a very good tool and it's informative. I'm not trying to say it's not, but kind of context also comes into play in looking at that projection. We provide that in categories. You have page 2 and page 3, which I don't show here, lay out all the assumptions that are built into the projection. The benefit commencement date on the top is using the Book of Discipline and your birthday and your years of service that we have a benefit access to determine what that year is going to be, age 65 or 40 years of service. We have the lifetime income in the top third of that table. And what you'll see there with lifetime income is those are the annuities. We have assumptions, life at 72% COLA, but you can make the other elections as you go through and maintain your own, run your own projections. But you can see lifetime income. You and your spouse cannot outlive that part of the benefits. That will go until both of you pass and then no further benefit. But then the account balances area there in the middle. That's the 35% of MPP, the CRCCM DC or UMPIP. And then we're assuming that program I referenced where we generate the amount of installment payments for you, monthly installment payments for you. We assume you're going to elect that to life stage retirement income. So that's where those dollars got generated. If you look at page 3, the bottom, you're going to see the account balances the day I ran it with the projections to the day. That's the benefit commencement date on the top of the page. Then we take that to a very sophisticated algorithm, come up with what we see as estimated amounts of monthly installments. And then the last is the income replacement ratio. This is informative, but certainly a conversation with EY and your own financial planner in that percentage that you see there, let's just say it's 48%. Right now, that's just your Wespath stuff against your plan compensation. Now, this is projected out to whatever date is on your particular projection. But with that, it's just your Wespath plan accounts, your compensation. It doesn't take into consideration Social Security. It's not taking into consideration your spouse's benefits that you may have as an overall household. But again, very informative for when you do more of a comprehensive review of your future retirement income planning and financial planning strategies. EY Financial Planning Services, I've mentioned them several times. They provide comprehensive, holistic household financial planning services at no additional cost to us whatsoever. When I reviewed the funds, I talked about expense ratios. We have very low expense ratios. How we pay for the overhead of Wespath is from those expense ratios. It kicks off the fund, fills the pool pays the overhead. EY Financial Planning Services is a part of that. So we all pay for EY by virtue of being in the funds, but it's free to the extent to which there's no out-of-pocket expense to you. You can call them as often as you like, be on the phone with them as long as you like. There's no hitting limits with any of these. Okay, they will provide objective advice for you. There's no sales pitch. They're not going to look at something you're in or your husband's in, a life insurance policy or something, and say, oh, I can get you into something better, and start to sell. They're not going to do that. They're going to weigh in on what they see. They may make some commentary that you might want to act on, but they're not going to be trying to sell you any replacement types of financial products. Now, they do provide holistic household financial planning services, but they also will deal with anything on a financial nature. Renting or leasing a car, starting up a fund for college savings for the children, those types of things. You see, you have the 800 line there, 800-360-2539. Wespath, we have the website with them as well. I think in the packet you got their brochure, so you can go in, take a look at them, work with them. Again, they can provide a comprehensive retirement plan. They can talk to you about the Roth contribution account strategy, how you're using the investments, life stage investment management or self-managing. And then also, how do you want to fund just a college education account for yourself, grandchild? You're going to buy a home, you're going to buy a car, you're going to buy a refrigerator. You can talk to them about all these things. Managing debt. Not all debt is bad debt. Having a house with a mortgage, not necessarily bad debt. Excessive credit card debt, they can help you think through strategies to start to maybe get a little bit better management around that. And pretty much anything that is financial nature, you can call EY Financial, get no out of pocket to you, no limits on the amount that you use them. So, we recommend using them often. They have EY Navigate's their website. Here, a lot of educational tools. You can kind of get at whether or not how you are as an investor. Are you a conservative investor, or are you a moderate investor? Are you an aggressive investor? Those types of things. Just kind of continue for you to learn about the financial situation, financial markets, and your own approach and theory and thoughts about investing in the markets. They got a lot of stuff there. Again, no shortage of educational materials are provided by us at Wespath. We also have one-on-one benefit education consultations. So you work with myself, that's Todd Kirkiston on the screen. Bob Christophel is our manager. You've probably seen Bob at other events. And we will do a half-hour one-on-one benefit education consultation. We'll go through your benefit projection. We'll go through your clergy service record, anything else that you want to talk to us about. If you're getting ready to have an EY conversation, you might want to have a one-on-one consultation first, just to get a handle on things a little bit more clearer. We can help you generate questions you may have for them. So, we really enjoy doing it. In an email I'm going to send to Reverend Lee at the end of this, it's going to be the link if you want to sign up for a one-on-one benefit education consultation. And it's also not a one and done thing. We schedule it for a half hour, but if we want to have more, we can always have more of this. So this kind of gets me to the conclusion of really the core of today's webinar, the pension plans, the retirement plans, thinking around retirement, how plans and features work. But as an action plan, look at UMPIP, enrolled in it. Maybe think about the contribution account, a contribution strategy, maybe the contribution type, maybe changing a fixed dollar amount to a percentage, those types of things. Looking at the investment strategy, life stage investment management, doing your own thing. Benefitaccess.org that you can use as a tool, EY, you have the consultations with benefit educators. So you have all those resources available to you. And then we always have future topical webinars. Right now, I was thinking to put the dates there and it slipped my mind. We have 4 pre-retirement, generic retirement, pre-retirement webinars coming up in October and November, where it's kind of very similar to what you're hearing right now, but it's good to hear this stuff over and over again. But we'll go a little deeper into the distribution options that are available, because this webinar is really geared for people who are about 5 years out and getting closer to retirement. So we get a little deeper into the actual distribution options that are available. And our events page, there's all kinds of things coming up. And this is the big one that's coming up. Now that we're trying to get through this pandemic, and post-pandemic, we in Colorado will be having a Clergy Benefits Academy and a Rev It Up. I thought Rev It Up was on here. That's my bad. I must have picked up an old one. But we're going to have the Clergy Benefits Academy. It's a 2.5-day intensive workshop that actually covers all 5 dimensions of well-being. So certainly we'll have retirement and finance, but there'll be other things that are involved in there as well. And then we're going to follow it up with Rev It Up, which is for clergy 40 and younger. Same type of thing, but getting people to think more in the longer term concept, saving and being ready for retirement. But we have that all out in Colorado. If you haven't started seeing things coming into your email box yet, probably in the mail, heads up, you're going to start hearing a lot about this if you haven't already. And then we're hoping to get, a good number of individuals out there. Just before I got started, I was able to go to 2 of these, and they are fabulous. I do think they're fabulous. And very long days, there's a lot of content that comes through, but it's very, very good as people are leaving it very happy and satisfied with the event. We have our participant solutions area. Again, this deck is going to be provided, so the phone numbers are there with benefit education consultations. You have the benefit access and EY financial planning. That's all available to you. Now, I have 2 other segments that I'm going to go through. I think we're okay for time right now. I'm not sure if anybody wants to jump in with any questions or just wait till the end, but certainly call it out as I go through. So I just wanted to point out, and it's just really informative at this stage, that in front of General Conference, which was supposed to be, 2020, we have a new retirement plan proposal in place. And it's our plan called COMPASS. Doesn't stand for anything. It's actually a word. It's not an acronym for the first time. COMPASS is a plan that's going to be an account balance plan. We're going to be moving away from the defined benefit, traditional benefit in that formula and coming back to an account balance plan. I'll just give you some highlights of that plan. But before I do that, I want to assure you that what you have in the Clergy Retirement Security Program, the defined benefit, years of service, and the DAC and the factor, when you go to retirement, that will all come into play. The protected benefits, they don't go away because we bring in a new plan. We freeze that plan where it was. So if this goes, we're looking now at 1/1/2026, General Conference 24. No way we get it ready for 1/1/25, 1/1/26. The credited years of service in that second tranche, post 2013, will stop counting on 12/31/2025, and for all full time it'll be 13, wherever people are with their years, but that would be a 13-year time period. That stays. You're going to get your annuities, you're going to get your COLA attached to it, all of that. But then COMPASS is going to come out, and it's going to be an account balance plan. It's still intended to provide lifetime income for clergy. Our actuarial side, which I'm a part of that department, is very deep involved in all this to ensure adequate retirement income, the actuarial equivalent of what these annuities through the formula are providing. But it also takes into account the decline in the U.S. membership of churches, denominational activity that's happening, and also high levels of seminary debt. So people have to, part of this actually takes that into consideration as well. That details a little downstream. So we're still working on sustainability, long-term planning, long-term retirement income, maintaining that. Becomes more affordable. Instead of defined benefit liability always having to be paid, this actually gets to be more of a cash flow type of thing and reduces costs. The adequacy is there. The actuarials continue to test it, make sure it's going to still provide adequate retirement income, and it will provide more flexibility down the road. But I'm just going to talk to you more about the contribution side as opposed to the distribution side. There are going to be 3 channels of employer contributions that are going to be provided to you. The first is all full-time appointed clergy will receive the same flat dollar amount contribution each month. And levels the playing field because everybody started off in the same spot. There's a little equity in there, so it kind of just gives a level playing field. Here it says $140 per month. This was predicated on this plan going live 2023, I guess maybe. It's going to index with inflation. So it's 140 or whatever it's going to be when we roll it out, or 126, but it will go up with the cost of living over time. So 140 to 143, 145, 148, all of that. The second channel re-individualizes itself back to you. It's your pay, your compensation. 3% of that pay will be provided as a contribution for you. And then the last one is, right now, 1% of you on PIP gets a 1% CRISP DC match. For COMPASS, it's going to be 4%. So you're putting in 1% you on PIP, you're going to get a 1% match. 2, 3, 4. So 4 is going to be the maximum relative to the match. We always encourage people to keep going higher and higher and higher for their personal contributions going in. But there'll be a 4% matching contribution. That will be the maximum. So for individuals now who are at 4% or higher in their UNPIP, that's great. Try to maintain that and lift it if you can. But for those who are maybe 1 or 2% now, just know that in a few years, you want to step that up to make sure that you maximize that contribution. And I'm not sure about all of the details yet in terms of how all of this is going to play out, but I do know with that seminary debt relief that in the plan for participants who have seminary debt, that they can contribute 2% and still receive the 4% matching contribution. It kind of gives them a little bit of relief relative to that additional 2% going back to continue to pay for student loans. But there'll be more on that. I'm sure there's criteria and years of service and all that involved, but certainly it's something that for many people, and certainly going into the future, will be a good benefit to help offset some of that seminary debt. So you're going to have different forms going in on the accumulation side. You're going to have the employer contributions. You're going to have your own UMPIP contributions. They're invested with investment rates over time. And then again, down the road, you will be able to see this coming back to you as retirement income. That's a topic in terms of getting into details on that for another time. And certainly as this plan gets through general conference and we start getting ready to make it the active plan, you'll be hearing more and more and more about it. Webinars, seminars, however, we plan to do that at that time. And then lastly, the public service loan forgiveness program. And I was saying to Reverend Lee coming in that coincidentally, we had two webinars, same webinar, but same individuals, 2 times speaking to us. And one individual was from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. His name is Scott Filter, and he's allowed us to use the slides, and we have a recording of that session on wespath.org. It's actually right on the front page, but I'm going to send the link to Reverend Lee at the end of this anyway. Certainly this is kind of outside the realm of Wespath, my expertise, but I'll try to give some high-level executive overview of what this is, and then get you some resources later on that can help you think through this if this is an opportunity for you. I do have to say, though, that the audio quality on what you're going to hear on wespath.org is not the best. So the program was established to encourage individuals to pursue public service careers. So it was a way in which people recognize that for people who work in public service, often these types of positions are not high-paying positions, and so that individuals may have a hard time continuing to make their loan repayments, their student loan repayments over time. So this is a way in which it can provide relief for those individuals who have pursued public service nonprofit type of employment. And again, it's designed to help satisfy their student debt over that period of time. Now I'm going to use cheat sheets here because, again, like I said, I'm not really an expert on this. But the program, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness, make sure I say it right, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. It's a federal program that offers loan forgiveness for borrowers who make 120 qualifying monthly payments while working full-time for an eligible public service employer or nonprofit organization and complete an application process. And I will say that there is forms, online applications, as you can imagine, it's a government program. It's all going to be involved in, if you're eligible for this, take advantage of it. So again, it was designed to encourage individuals who don't necessarily have high-paying jobs, but to go into this type of work and then provide some relief for them. With the context of the qualifying employer, it has to be an eligible public service employer or a nonprofit organization. Originally, as the program rolled out, it was intended, it could be satisfied by satisfying 4 criteria. The first is the loan. The right loan has to have been taken. There's all kinds of student loans. There's federal loans and there's public loans, private loans. Private loans in the private sector. So this is a direct federal loan is the right type of student loan. It has to be in the right type of repayment plan. So it has to be in a plan that has already been set up to be a payment amount that is based on the income received of the individual. So the amount of the loan isn't necessarily a fixed amount by virtue of the loan. By providing that income, there can be an adjustment to the amount of the loan that's going to be paid, and that adjustment can actually be 0. The government will recognize that there are times when no loan repayment may be able to be provided. Okay, and Past employment can be documented. If it's not documented yet, past employment can be documented to capture that 120 qualifying monthly payments. So as you look back through your work history, if it's not all here with the UMC, if you look back at your work history and you work in a nonprofit or a public service type of employment, through paperwork and getting information from that or that employer, you can get those months counted for you. If because of an income-based need, you have a zero amount of monthly repayment, that is still considered to be a repayment in the context of counting 120 monthly payments. So even though it's a zero, it still clicks going forward because that's a part of the proper repayment plan. With the COVID relief that you may be familiar with, it's certainly in the news a lot, but with that COVID relief for students not to have to make loan repayments through all of that time period of COVID, all of those months will count toward that 120 qualifying monthly payments. Now that was supposed to end August 31st, 2022, so just next week, but everything you hear and read is that they're probably going to extend that again, but those months will continue to count even though no repayment has been made. There's a limited waiver to this, and if you listen to that webinar, you're going to hear him say this over and over and over again. October 31st, 2022, that is the deadline for any adjustments that you want to make, any paperwork that you want to file, anything that needs to be a part of the documentation requirements relative to getting this benefit, getting the loan forgiven. You have until October 31st, 2022 to do so. And if you don't, then it's going to goes back to the original rules of the plan. That's my understanding. Now, under this limited waiver, this waiver that came out, that's going to expire October 31st, 2022, any prior payment will count as a qualifying payment. So you have the 120 payments, but you maybe have been paying those to a different type of student loan. Certain student loans that don't fall into the direct federal loan repayment program can still be considered federal loans for the waiver purposes and have those months get counted towards the 120. See, it does not matter the type of the loan, the repayment plan you were on, whether the payment was made full or on time. Okay, so you have a lot of flexibility. You can receive the forgiveness even if you're working at another employer that doesn't qualify. If you know you work for an employer that it does qualify, and you go back through and you get the documentation and you get the payment amount and the number of payments, that will apply as well. Again, it ends October 31st, 2022. And for next steps, this is where it kind of comes back to you working with the Board of Education or this other organization to really figure out how it applies to your particular situation. It does not necessarily matter what you do, but it matters where you work. So a good example is at a school. If you think about all the type of work that gets done at a school, it isn't just the teachers and the administrative staff that have the benefit of this forgiveness program. It's also all the other support, the custodial, cafeteria, all that. Anybody who works within the context of that particular nonprofit or public service organization, anybody can get that applied to them. Now, when this program rolled out, I think in 2007, for reasons I don't know, faith-based organizations and clergy were excluded from the ability to take advantage of this program. But on, I think I wrote the date down, but in August 14th of 2020, new regulations came out that said this will apply to faith-based organizations and clergy persons and lay employees of faith-based organizations, not only during the course of COVID, not only during the course of this waiver period, but going forward into the future. So clergy persons are eligible for this program, all the other criteria being met. The UMC is a national denomination. So one of the questions I received is it qualified as a nonprofit for the PSFL definition? Yes, and he actually touches on this during his webinar. And basically, It's often that a national denomination at the national level will have its own 501c3 status, and that can cascade down all the way through, or at an annual conference level or at the individual church level, as long as the organization you're working for is a qualifying employer, so in our instance, a 501c3 organization, then you are working for a qualified employer. If you move from one appointment to the next, to the next, to the next, all of that service time will count and will all carry forward with you. It's considered to be like the one tranche or bucket of time and repayment. All of that will. If you're a clergy person who has 2 part-time appointments, then it still is eligible. As long as you're working 30 hours a week or more, then that part-time work that you kind of put together by working in more than one place, that also will qualify you in terms of the place that you're working. It's a qualified employer. You're meeting the hours work requirement. And again, just through understanding the 501c3 nature and then doing all the other administrative requirements, this money can be, this program can be available to you. All the payments made from October 1st, 2007 will count, but they do not have to be consecutive. So really the point here is, if you come in and out of different types of employment where it's a qualified employer for 6 years and then you go somewhere else and then you come back and work for a qualified employer now, the initial 6 years will count, 4 years won't, but you can just start building off of that. So they do not have to be consecutive in terms of the number of months that you work. So you just want to make sure you have an understanding of that, your years, your months of work that qualify for this program. As far as really a good resource to begin with, it's right there on that page. That's studentaid.gov/PSLF. He references that throughout this presentation deck. That would be a good resource for you to start to take advantage of, start to see the form requirements, other individual requirements that may have to come into play to get this all tightened up for you. And then when it comes to how do I qualify for the direct loans? Basically, direct loans are considered in the core part of the provision to be the direct federal loans that get applied. But with the waiver, other federal loans can also be applied. And I'm not familiar with all of these, to be quite frank with you, but if you have other federal loans that can now qualify through this waiver period, this FFAL program or Perkins loan, other loans, what you need to do is you need to request to consolidate all of your loans together. And once they are consolidated all together, and that happens before October 31st, 2022, then you can get the forgiveness application applied to your loan at that point in time. So if you have different ones, find out which ones apply, which ones may not apply. The ones that apply, certainly try to get them consolidated. You can reach back to prior employers if you don't have the documentation yourself to try to just fill out the required documentation that they will provide for you, and you can go ahead and go forward. The individual, it's kind of funny on the webinar, because he speaks to how it's nothing to panic about. If you go onto the website, like this student aid website, and you're looking for your particular employer and you don't find it, just don't panic right away. People's saint can be S-A-I-N-T or S-T, there can be different spelling and all of that. And then he said, now when he started his own, he used to work for the U.S. Department of Education, and the U.S. Department of Education hadn't set themselves up yet on the website. So I don't know why, but if you're looking to try to determine if one of your prior employers or your current employer is a qualifying employer and you don't see it right away, just dig deeper or use some of the resources available to you to make sure that they are available to you. But again, this is just kind of like a high level, kind of get you thinking about it if it applies to you. But the link to the webinar, the deck is a PDF, as well as other materials will come to Reb and Lee, and I'll ask Reb and Lee to just distribute that out to this year's group, and take it from there. So other than the disclaimer that no advice and guidance, just educational material has been provided. Are there any questions anyone may have at this time? Okay, Reverend Lee, if it sounds like We're all set. I don't know if you want to come back on and